Hey Mom Zombies, come join me, DJ Mombie, every Monday afternoon from 1 to 2 p.m. for my show American Mombie, where I share all of my tales as an extremely exhausted, busy mom who feeds on coffee and survives on wine. Right here on Penguin Radio, the official radio station of Dominican University of California. Turn your dial to 102.3 FM or listen online at radio.dominican.edu. See you there.
Hey Zombie Moms, thanks again for tuning into my show American Mombie right here on Penguin Radio. I'm your host DJ Mombie, back again with my tales as an extremely exhausted busy mom that feeds on coffee and survives on wine. I'll be here for you from 1 to 2 Monday afternoons, so shove the last of your breakfast down, I know you haven't had time to finish it, and sit down and take a load off. Today, I have a very special guest, and I'm really excited to introduce her. I have invited my bestie, Kira Wright, to join me on American Mombie. Welcome, Kira.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yay. Are you excited about today's show?
So excited.
Awesome. So today's show is entitled Road to Adoption, and I think it's really important to recognize that there are many different kinds of mombies out there. And some have entered into parenthood through the wonderful world of adoption. Kira and her husband are going through the process of adoption, and she is going to talk to us about her experience with infertility as well as the adoption process thus far. And I want you to know that the content of this show is my own opinion. I am not a therapist, psychologist, doctor, or gynecologist, and everything I talk about is based on my own experiences. And today, the same applies to Kira as well. So Kira and I will be discussing her experience with infertility and her experiences so far with the adoption process, a Mombie who inspires as usual, a couple of products that we love, and answering a couple questions from a Mombie to be. So Kira, welcome, and thank you for joining me on American Mombie.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, to get started, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and when you decided that children were in your future?
So, I'm in my 30s. I work as a technical writer in the tech industry. I graduated from SSU with my degree in English. I met my husband in college in poetry class, very romantic, and we've been married since 2011. We've got 2 awesome dogs, Coheed, he's a little beagle, and Nina, who's a very feisty husky. I enjoy camping, hiking, reading, writing, drawing, and our newest hobby is beer making. So as far as our journey to become parents, my husband and I always knew we were meant to be parents, but we had certain milestones we wanted to accomplish before we made the commitment. We wanted to be done with school, we wanted to get married, we wanted to have good careers, and we wanted to own our own home. So it wasn't until our early 30s that we really felt ready to welcome a child. And unfortunately, nature wasn't on our side. We began trying in the usual way. Most healthy couples our age conceive within a year, but we couldn't get that positive pregnancy test in that time frame. So we finally sought medical help. We both were subjected to multiple blood tests, physicals, and samples.
Special samples?
Special samples.
Samples for men's samples, just to clarify?
Yes, my poor husband had to, provide samples. I got to have a fun procedure called I'm going to say this wrong every time, hysterosalpingogram.
Big word.
Yes. Which is more commonly called HSG for reasons I'm sure you can figure out. So that procedure, dye is injected into your uterus and fallopian tubes. Then they're viewed in x-rays, and that determines if there's any abnormalities that could cause infertility issues like cysts or tumors or blockage or anything like that. None of these tests offered any clues to what was going on with us. So,
super frustrating.
Yeah, it definitely was. So we moved forward with infertility treatments. And so we began the first of our IUI, or artificial insemination cycles. So if you're not familiar with these, it's a pretty involved process. I got very familiar with my local Kaiser facility. I found out that Fridays are a really crummy time to go to go to Kaiser, but sometimes that was out of my control. So it starts with about a week of hormone-altering pills like Clomid. Taking these is like having another week of PMS.
Good times.
Yes.
We all love that. We all want to force PMS on ourselves.
So, yeah, exactly. I was like, oh boy. So my poor husband had to deal with an extra week of that. So my husband also refers to that as messing with my chemistry set because
I like that.
It definitely felt like that. So a few weeks later, I'd go in for a vaginal ultrasound to check follicles and make sure I was going to release the egg soon, make sure that, all the drugs were doing the things that they were supposed to be doing. Later at home, after this fun vaginal ultrasound, I would self-inject myself. with an HCD trigger shot. Standing in front of the mirror with a pinch of my tummy in one hand and the syringe in the other, I eventually forced the needle in with shaking hands.
So is that the one where it like automatically comes out when you like touch it to yourself?
No, I had to push like the plunger. So
okay.
I actually had to like get past like the skin, and so it was
fun. That sounds. If you're not a nurse, I'm sure that is a new experience.
Yes. And it was funny. The first time I did it, I got to do a practice one with the nurse, and that one seemed easy for some reason. But as soon as I got home and had to do it myself, and my husband was very nice, like, "Do you need help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's all I need is two nervous people trying to do this." So eventually, I did get it. I nearly fainted the first time, but it actually did get easier after the first time. So
that's good.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there it is. So like 2 days later, my husband would have to provide a sample in the mornings, usually before work.
Because that's a great time to do that.
So, yeah, everyone's nice and relaxed before work, right? So he would do that, and then he would rush off to work, and I would have to keep his sample warm. By putting it in my waistband of my pants, and I would have to drive it to Kaiser. And so once it would get to Kaiser, they cleaned the sample and get it all ready. They make sure that everything looks good. And so I would go back to Kaiser. I'd lie on a table, and they would insert the sample in me with this really long tube.
Good time.
Yes, it was super fun. So
was that painful ever?
A couple times, like they put in this catheter to help, and like I got jabbed a couple times. I mean, it's it's just awful. I mean, ladies, it's like a worse version of a pap smear. So luckily, I mean, usually it went by pretty quickly, so that was the one good side. But, and then I would lay on the table for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'd get to go home.
And that's when you would sing Disney songs in your head.
Yes, exactly.
Like a whole new world.
Yes, that's me and Ashley's way of dealing. That, ladies, that's our secret. You gotta pick a Disney song and sing it.
DJ Mombie knows them all.
Yes, exactly. So we got to repeat this fun procedure with a little bit of variance 9 times. There's different drugs that you can do. There's like a few different little variables, but pretty much the same procedure about 9 times.
9 times. That's a lot. I mean, I know there probably are some women who go through more than that, but that seems like a lot. What were you thinking each time? Like, did you feel the same way each time? Did it get easier? Or did you feel like there was a progression of anxiety or a lessening? Like, what were you feeling emotionally?
Yeah, so the first couple times it's really hopeful. You're like, yay, finally, like, we're getting help. Like, this, whatever this little issue is that we're having, like, this is, gonna help. Like when we did that fun first procedure with the HSG, the X-rays, they actually, the dye can sometimes help with blockages if you have them. So after we had that done, we thought, maybe there was just like a blockage, and that's why what things weren't happening the way they were. So at first you're like really hopeful, and then like as you kind of get into this grind of like, okay, we're just going through this. Like sometimes we'd have to drive down to San Francisco on the weekends to do this because Kaiser in Santa Rosa doesn't do it on the weekends, so you're kind of getting in this grind, and you're kind of feeling like you're going through this, and you're not like really sure that's actually doing anything, and so there was a little bit of that, and it's just with infertility, there's this wave of like, you're always really hopeful in the beginning because you get to start over, and it's like, okay, so that last month, like, you have like maybe a day or two where you're like, okay, I'm on my period, obviously it didn't happen this month, and so then you get all ramped up like, okay, but this is gonna be the month,
right, yeah.
So there was that
after your 9 attempts.
Yeah, like, so it started to just feel like, okay, we just kept not being able to get that positive pregnancy test. I'd buy like 80 pregnancy tests every month and test like every day I could.
And they're so expensive.
They are.
I mentioned this in the past, how expensive that pregnancy tests are. It's crazy.
Exactly. So it was just like, it just kind of started to feel like this grind, and so there was a lot of anxiety, and just like I said, just this wave of like hope and then despair and then hope and then despair. Right. And so after the 9 times, after using the fun drugs and going through all the poking myself with a needle and getting poked and prodded
feeling
a couple
just
times.
like a pincushion.
Exactly.
By this point,
exactly.
Sure.
Like seen so many doctors and just all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, after 9 times, the drugs that they give you, you can't take anymore. It can actually cause other problems. if you do. It's like the Clomid, I think if you have too much Clomid buildup, there can be, problems with that. And then...
Oh, really? Like cancerous or...
I can't even remember what it was.
Yeah. Say that on a future show.
There you go, exactly. So there is a reason you can't take that, I think, more than 6 times. And you actually take a break after 3 months because you get these buildups. Yeah, so like we took one break, for a month, and then you start up again. And then actually the last 3 times was a different drug. It's actually a drug that you use to treat breast cancer, and which is really weird. There's a whole science behind it, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but it can help some women conceive that way. But you can only take that one 3 times as well. So,
okay.
So here we are. So we've done this 9 times, and no one is really figuring out what's going on, and we've talked to the head of infertility at Kaiser and for the whole Bay Area, and he said, at this point, the next thing you could do is in vitro. And so, he talked us through it, and, it's a very costly procedure.
And that's the one where just to clarify what in vitro is, that's where they fertilize the egg and sperm together and insert it into the uterus. Is that
exactly.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would go in, like you take a bunch of drugs before, of course, and then you
not
go in.
Not fun drugs.
Oh, not fun. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yes, the fun drug. No, just kidding. So no fun drugs. And then you go in and they actually extract eggs from you. They'll actually keep. I think they do. I think 3 or 4. Your best eggs, and then they will artificially inseminate the eggs, and then they will put them back inside of you. First time you do this, it's $14,000. That's to extract.
So expensive.
That's just for the eggs. That doesn't include the drugs, which are another $4,000 to $5,000.
Oh my gosh! So right now we're up at 20.
Yeah.
We're about 19 to 20,000 at that point.
Exactly. So that's just for one chance. And so when I talked to the doctor, he said, "Oh, well, I give you about a 40% chance to conceive with each one."
Wow.
And so, they extract 3 eggs, so you get 3 opportunities to do this with that one extraction. So it's definitely not a decision that to be taken lightly, to do this and, to go through what we'd already been through, taking, all of these drugs and going in all the time. And, with in vitro, it's, just as much, but the closest office was actually San Rafael, so you have to drive there. Where we are now.
But it's still a bit of a ways.
Yeah, exactly. Just, taking more time off work, which I'd already, been trying to do that before. So we, had to make this decision. Like, is this the way forward for us, And so
financially, or the chance that it doesn't work out.
Exactly. Like, how far are we really willing to go with this infertility journey?
Well, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, Kira will be getting into her decision to adopt and her experience so far. So please stay tuned. This is American Mombie on Penguin Radio, radio.dominican.edu. Be right back. We are back listening to American Mombie on Penguin Radio on radio.dominican.edu. I have a very special guest with me. If you're just tuning in, she is my very best friend since high school, which was like only a few years ago, right?
Definitely.
And she's been sharing with us her experience with infertility. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that last bit about?
No, I guess the only thing I didn't discuss was the possibility of miscarriage. And I know that a lot of women have gone through that. And, having heard that from, some people that we know, that was another thing that we had to think about with, going through in vitro and what we'd already gone through. And at this point, we'd been, actively trying to have a child for 2 years. So that was also something that was on our minds as far as, going through the in vitro process.
Right. I mean, that's always definitely, I think for especially any pregnancy, it's definitely something that's scary. But I think when you're going through the infertility process, there's even more, I feel like there'd be more even a heightened fear because of all the work that you had gone through.
Definitely.
So going on to our topic, the road to adoption, let's talk about getting into that and what made you decide to go that route.
Cool. So, before the break, I left you with the in vitro fertilization cliffhanger. What did we decide? And I'm sure from the title of the show today, you figured out what we decided. But hubby and I, my awesome husband and I, the way that we like to talk about things is we love hiking. And I mentioned my love of hiking before. So we went up to this beautiful park in Santa Rosa called Taylor Mountain. And we, we're hiking, and we just decided that was the time to start talking about how we wanted to continue creating our family. So Brian and I both have a lot of adoption in our families. Brian's parent, Deborah, she actually is a family of 4 adoptees.
Wow.
And so, and they really had this awesome, family dynamic, and, all the kids are just really awesome and really accomplished adults and really love their family. And so that was a really good a good example of how an adoptive family can work. I also have a cousin who has adopted 3 children from the same birth mom, and that's how she decided to create her family, and so that was really awesome as well. And they have an open adoption situation, and so that was also important to see. And even Ashley's husband comes from a family of adoptees, in which
that is true.
Yeah, so that was also really cool to see, and
And just a little bit of background about my husband. So my mother and father-in-law adopted 2 children, and then 15 years later, my husband came as a surprise. So there was definitely adoption was their main route, sort of from the beginning. And there was some infertility issues on that end as well. And sometimes you just never know. Is there still that chance that you could become pregnant at some point?
There is, and that's, something that we, would be okay with if that happened. At this point, I haven't gotten into, obviously we decided to go with adoption, but,
Sure.
If there is, that hopeful, or that possibility as well that, we still could conceive. I know there is a worry about conceiving too late. So if for some reason, nothing happens, and we're not actively trying to have, a biological child at this point, but if it did happen, that would be fine. But if I got older, I would probably still go on birth control, because that can be a little more dangerous,
Right.
Some women, that's fine. It's just not a chance that I don't think that we would like to take. So,
Right.
Yeah.
There's definitely more complications with a later in life pregnancy.
Exactly.
And like 35 is your cutoff kind of time frame for starting to look at, if there are challenges both for you and the baby.
Exactly.
So it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did you start researching?
So right away, obviously once we made this decision, this was May of last year. We called our families on Mother's Day to tell them that, we had decided that was the way that we wanted to move forward. And, my mom and my grandma and, anyone else we told was very supportive and just really excited, and found that really special. So right away, though, I jumped into researching, because there are so many different ways to adopt, and there are a lot of agencies. You can go through a lawyer, you can do domestic adoption, you can do international adoption, you can do foster to adopt, and they're all really great ways to adopt, but they all do come with their own, challenges and, pros and cons. So we definitely weighed those pros and cons. Some of those things that you look at are cost, the amount of time it takes to place. Sometimes, especially with international adoption, you can wait a little bit longer, but it might not necessarily be as expensive as far as the price or the cost of working with the agencies and stuff. But
interesting.
But then you also have to think more about travel costs,
travel time, travel costs, staying.
Yes, exactly. So if you internationally adopt, and everything depends on the country that you choose. So you usually choose one country to adopt, because just being too open, you have so many different variables to work with.
Good point.
So but depending on the country, you might have to stay in that country for a month while you wait for paperwork.
Wow.
And usually also with international adoption, you're not usually getting a newborn infant. They're usually a little bit older, and that's just the nature of...
Like a few months old, per se?
Yeah, usually, you can still get a very young child, but you're usually not at the hospital with the mom, getting the baby. So,
okay.
Yeah, I was reading a book about a lady who... adopted internationally, and she actually adopted from an orphanage internationally.
Oh, wow.
And so that is another way that you can adopt internationally. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So after all of this research, and another way to adopt that I didn't mention was a foster to adopt situation.
Oh, right.
Which is really cool. There are a ton of kids out there waiting, and that has worked for a lot of people. But for us, the possibility of the foster failing, like, it's not a fail, it's just a, usually with foster, they're trying, the goal of foster is usually to get them back with their biological parents.
Right, so you have the possibility of not actually keeping that child.
Exactly.
That child might go back to its parents long term.
Exactly. So because they want to give the opportunity to the parents to parent if they want to, if they want to do the steps to, maybe they have a drug situation or they're in jail or whatever, whatever is going on, or so they want to give the parents the opportunity to parent. And so I've heard great stories where, we got a young baby and, 6 months later we were able to adopt. And I've also heard the other side where, we had a young baby, we fell in love with her, and her parents ended up deciding to parent.
And that's got to be tragic.
Exactly.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So having gone through what we had just gone through with the infertility, Brian and I wanted a little bit more
of a sure thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were, we wanted the baby, from pretty much from the get go, where we go into the hospital or when they're very young, so we get that time to bond and, really get to be their parents from the beginning.
And how long would you say that you did that research for?
When I want something, I'm pretty tenacious. So
yeah, you are.
I wouldn't say that it really took me that long. I mean, as soon as we made that decision to adopt, I was like, I'm gonna figure out
like a missile
this out.
On
yeah,
target.
Exactly. So it was like, okay, pretty much any free time I had was just, doing research, reading people's stories, talking to Brian, of course, what he wanted and what he felt strongly about. And, he was really supportive through this whole thing. So, not very long, maybe a week. And then, once you decide the type of adoption you want to do, then you have to decide how you want to go through it, what agency or what, method you want to use. You want to use a lawyer? Do you want to do a self-match? And there's all these things. So, we decided to go with a local adoption agency in San Francisco. Their name is Adoption Connection, and they're really great. They actually are part of a Jewish organization, and they're just been really supportive, and they just, of course, great reviews. Everything's about reviews right now, right? They even you can even Yelp review an adoption agency if you weren't aware of that.
You can Yelp anything.
You can Yelp anything. Yeah, I will Yelp my sandwich. No,
right.
I guess that's how it started. But anyway, the application time. So once you've decided about what method you're going to use, you have to start applying. And maybe some of you have heard that adoption involves a lot of paperwork, and I can definitely firsthand say that it does involve a lot of paperwork.
Yes. And I can personally witnessed that because I was one of her people that gave a recommendation, so yes. I wrote a little bit about it too, and I can't imagine the amount of paperwork that she had to do.
Yes, and unfortunately Ashley was one of the people who had to do my recommendation twice.
Yeah. So, well, luckily I saved it.
Yes, that's true.
Because I like to save things.
That was very smart. Yes, so I'll get to what happened later. But anyway, so this very short application begins with like a 1,000-page autobiography, which it did feel that way. It was one of the harder parts. It asks you a lot of questions about your relationships with each other, with your family, with growing up, how you feel about adoption, how you feel about discipline, all about your home, all about your values. I mean, just
your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Why do you want to adopt? Just pretty much everything that you could think about. Some people I have heard have actually been asked about their sex life. Luckily, we did not.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, we were like, oh, okay. But luckily, we didn't have to do that. So yeah, it's very personal, but it didn't get into that personal.
TMI.
Yeah, TMI. Yeah, so we were just talking about the application process, and as we mentioned, we had to create these autobiographies. Basically, we did mention that we had to get referrals from friends and family to basically say that we were good people and we could take care of a child. Very important stuff. And,
we're good people.
So thank you so much to the friends who did those. I know they weren't the easiest thing. A couple other things that they ask when you're going through this process is you have to give tax returns to show that you are financially responsible and that you can afford to have a child.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think Oh, I was going to say, I think I mentioned that in the past, but I think I did that for a school project.
Oh, yeah.
I was like Michael Jackson, if you can't feed the baby, don't have the baby. Yeah.
That is true, exactly. So, yeah, we had to get background checks and fingerprints, and it was funny. Like, as soon as we had these background checks and fingerprints, I was like, you can't do anything wrong. Nothing. Like, don't...
I know you guys were planning on going to rob a bank.
Oh,
right
yes,
then.
yes, exactly. But, there's this whole, like, Department of Justice thing. If you get pulled over, it gets,
and that's
reported
like,
to your adoption
because then
agency.
you think you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Have I done anything in my past that,
Yes.
I get it. That is funny.
On top of that, you take classes, and then you have this thing called the home study, which anyone, if you're going through foster or you're going through adoption, this is where you have a social worker who works with you and comes into your home and makes sure that it's safe and, make sure that it's, you have space for a baby.
Sure.
And we have 2 dogs, which I mentioned before, and our husky is a little younger and she's a rescue. And so, she can be excited. She really likes new people. She's super duper duper friendly, but we were afraid that we were going to get a person who wasn't a dog person because, like, if you're not a dog person, a dog that is like, very friendly and wants to like, be touching you the whole time, licking your face and possibly, trying to jump on you a little bit.
Might give the wrong impression.
Exactly, yeah. So we were very lucky. We actually had a lady who had her own northern breed, and so she actually loved the dog so much, which was really good. And she was like, I want to take Nina home with me. We're like, oh goodness, thank goodness, And so, and Nina's a very safe and sweet dog. It's just, that definitely could have gone a different way if we had a person who didn't like dogs.
Right.
So that was, part of it. We did have to get classes down in the city, and which were actually really cool. We got to hear from recent parents who had adopted. We got to hear from birth moms. We got to just talk in a group, with other adopted parents, from different backgrounds, and it was a really interesting thing. So we feel like we have a license to parent now.
Yeah, I can
we went
imagine.
through all this stuff.
It's more so than people who just birth babies go through, and most of us probably should.
Well,
so it looks like it was 4 months of applications.
Yeah. So just about. So we started in May, and we had a little paperwork snafu. So we were actually officially being placed, ready to be presented to birth parents in the early September. So I don't know, what's the math on that? 4 to 5 months. 4 to 5 months. Yeah, about that time. So
you got it done really fast, though.
We did actually. Like I said, I'm very tenacious when I want something done. I definitely get it done. The lady who runs our birth mother outreach program, Malia, she is fabulous, and she's so fabulous that she is insanely busy. So to just get an appointment with her, I think was like 2 or 3 months out or something like that. And I was like, is there anyway? And we especially wanted because my husband's a teacher and he was on summer school break, and so we were really trying to get him in together during the summer when he had time. And so unfortunately she called me and was like, you know what, I had someone cancel, can you come down like tomorrow? And I was like, yes, I'm there, but unfortunately my husband wasn't able to do it. He actually had one day where he had a commitment. Right. So I rushed down there, took the day off, last minute, and rushed down there and, and met with her, and it was all great. But like I said, I really wanted things to be moving quickly. We'd felt like we'd been waiting for so long, and so, for us, that actually was a little quicker than some folks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we were really happy.
And what would you say has been the hardest part of this process?
Well, definitely the waiting is the hardest part, as Tom Petty said.
Right. Good song.
Yes, one of my
Good
favorites.
song.
One of my favorite artists. Listened to him a lot as growing up as a child. So
I remember.
Yes. I probably subjected Ashley to a lot of Tom Petty in high school.
I think it's more Corn. We won't go
Oh,
there.
well, yes, I did have a thing for Corn in high school. How many times did we watch that music video that so yeah, the waiting is the hardest part. So the waiting for a match is actually called paper pregnant. So we've been paper pregnant since September, and it's really hard waiting for your family to begin. When you're pregnant, you have
There's
a
an end
timeline. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can come quicker. I mean, certainly, 9 months is just the standard, but that doesn't mean that's what it's going to happen. But for us, it's it's just the unknown. So you can have a stork drop, which is basically when you get a call that there's a baby at the hospital for you, and that's we're open to that, but it's definitely scary to think,
Right.
oh, today I could go to work and tomorrow I could be, picking
A mom.
Yeah, mom. Yeah, exactly.
Right away.
So that's a little less common. But, usually you would meet with a birth mom who has chosen you, and excuse me. And then she would let you know when, of course, she's going to be due, and that would be when your timeline would begin. So at this point, we haven't been matched yet, so we don't have a timeline. So we're definitely still during the waiting part.
And that could be anywhere from the beginning of 9 months to 4 months or 2, or whenever
Exactly.
the birth mom decided that she wanted to proceed with adoption.
Exactly. Yeah. So usually it's in the last trimester that this happens.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Exactly.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's the common way is usually in the last trimester. But some people, they do know right away that they're, not willing to parent, and that they, do want to birth the baby, but that they'd like to find a home for the baby. So, it really depends. So, the waiting is really hard. So we've been keeping ourselves busy, though. That's what your social worker says, take a vacation, learn a new hobby, all these things. So
Take up crochet.
I'm just kidding.
We
Get
don't
on
have to do
Etsy, sell everything. No. Fortunately, I'm not crafty.
Redecorate.
So redecorate. So some of the ways that we've been keeping busy is, we hike a lot. We took up beer making recently, which has been really fun.
Which I would like to try sooner than later.
Yeah, that's right. My goodness. Oh man, she just reminded me. I should have brought her a beer.
Well, not during the show.
Well, not during the show. Yes, of course. We wouldn't do that. So lately, I have been starting work on our nursery. We're feeling like that would be a really good way to just feel more prepared as parents. I think sometimes, like I said, when you're pregnant, you have that timeline. I really should have the nursery ready at this point or whatever.
You have to rush. You have that rush feeling. You can't,
Exactly.
For me, I didn't feel like I could take my time.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I feel like for you, it's exciting to watch you go through it, because I'm like, oh, she gets to pick everything out so
true.
easily. She could find anything on sale if she wanted to, or
That's
wait
true.
for it.
Yep.
And so I think it's fun in
It
that
definitely is.
in that sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. I've been all over Etsy, and I have time to wait for a special mobile from Russia.
Oh,
Which I did order.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, it should be really cool. It's like a hand done little wooden animals.
Aw.
We're doing a camping theme. So
It's camping, like woodland.
yeah, like woodland camping. So lots of little animals.
Foxes and-
yeah, exactly. So
Awesome.
yeah, so that's been really fun for us. And my newest thing is I actually started a blog. It's called The Adoption Journal. And I started it as just kind of an online record for, actually something to share with my child later about gifts that we'd been getting or milestones in the adoption journey. And, I was sharing it with friends and family to start. And I realized that I had so much to say. Like, there was just so much, because we didn't really announce our adoption to everyone until about after we'd been waiting for about 6 months, or maybe a little less. So I'd kind of been not bottling things up, but just hadn't been sharing as openly as I definitely wanted to. And so, once I started writing and I realized that there's just so much in the adoption world to talk about, I opened it up and kind of made it more of a platform for people in the adoption community as a whole. So that's been really fun, and
And educating others.
yeah, a little bit of education.
Because I've learned a lot
That's
reading your
good.
blog as well.
Yeah.
What's the name of your blog?
The Adoption Journal.
The Adoption Journal.
Uh-huh.
So check it out.
Yep.
The Adoption Journal by Kira Wright.
Yep. Adoption Journal. TheAdoptionJournal.com.
And what advice do you have for those who might be going through the process that could make it easier for them, or something that will prepare them? Thus far.
That's part.
While
Well,
the waiting.
me being the super reader and English major that I am, I of course would say, read. You are not the first person to be going through this. There are so many people who have written so many wonderful things about adoption and their own journeys. And, be a part of a group. I think that really helps. When we started doing our classes down at Adoption Connection and just connecting with other parents, because we didn't know any other families who were going through what we were going through. It was just, another pregnancy announcement, and we're just
Right.
like, we're not, so you feel for other people, and other people have gone through way more things than we have, but, it is nice to have that same, like, how long have you been waiting? And,
Right.
have you had, how's your, adoption brochure going? Just things like that you can't talk about with most of the people in your community. Maybe,
Right.
I mean, maybe you are lucky enough that you know someone who has gone through this, but
And the way things have been done 20 years ago are
Yes.
different than the way they are
Exactly.
today. And you were
Yes.
saying that Adoption Connection is open adoption, correct? It's all open?
Yeah, well, usually, so back in the day, they used to mostly do closed adoptions, which I mentioned my husband's parent, Deborah, all four of the children in her family were closed adoptions. And closed adoptions mean that, you know, when the mother gives birth, that the baby is taken and there's no communication beyond that. You know, the records are closed. And you know, no one ever talks, or there's no, you know, maybe you could get some medical history or something like that, but that's really it. And so nowadays, that's actually not common anymore. Closed adoption is actually not very common. So an open adoption refers to maintaining some kind of contact with the birth family, and which is, you know, really healthy for kids. Like I said, reading, of course, is, you know, a really great step to take to learn about all this stuff, because there are some great stories, you know, about the connections that, you know, kids have with their birth parent. You know, it's nice to know where you come from.
Yeah.
You know, it is nice to have that connection, you know.
Not that unknown.
Yeah.
Like having, sort of like completing that, you know, the unknown, I think,
Exactly.
just helps people find closure. And
you know, and for some people, maybe some kids don't want that, and that's totally cool. But that's the nice part about open, is that, you know, if a kid really has, you know, I'm really not that interested in knowing where I came from, that's okay too, you know. But with the open, at least there is the availability if someone
The
wants
option
to know.
for
Exactly.
them.
Yeah. You know, and I've talked to folks who have been part of closed adoptions, and they've never been curious. You know, it's not a big deal to them, but for some people it really is. So, you know, we're very open to an open adoption. That's, you know, great for us. And so, yeah, that's usually what Adoption Connection strives to do. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And through your experience of being paper pregnant, what are a couple of products or things that you love or could not live without during this process?
So I mentioned very, very briefly that part of the process of being matched with an expectant mom involves marketing yourself. So there's this whole weird side to it where you're
You're like commercializing.
yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
You're
Like, look
this
at
is
how
me.
great we are. Like, look at our house. Like, look at this. We're gonna be such amazing
I'm on
parents.
Penguin Radio
Yeah.
at Dominican University of California. Listen to me.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you're picking photos that you think would appeal to someone that you've never met, you know, and it's all these things. And so, you know, so you create this brochure, and it's this glossy brochure, you know, you feel like you're a house for sale or something, you know, but
I bet.
so it was kind of a weird experience. So, luckily, we know someone who is a really awesome graphic designer, A Touch of LA. I think Ashley's mentioned her on a show before.
I have, yes.
So she was able to help us create this really beautiful brochure. She helped us with some of the language, you know, and I am a writer, but I have a really hard time writing about myself in such a way. It's just a really weird thing
I think
to
it's
do.
like outside
you know?
perspective too. You
Exactly.
kind of want that, like, if someone were to look at you from the outside and like, how can I tune in? Because, you know, it's all very, it's just so much when you're looking at yourself and talking
Exactly.
about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So she did a really nice job. We're really, really proud of that brochure. I actually saved one so that I can put it in the baby book and show,
Aw.
you know, this is, you know, this is how we, you know, we're presented to your birth mom. And, you know, I think that's a really cool thing to have. So
So A Touch of LA, doing
Yes.
your brochure is one product
Yes.
or one thing that you love
Yes.
or have loved so far.
definitely. And I also mentioned that part of our journey so far has been getting our nursery ready. And, you know, it's different. Well, yes and no about being an adoptive mom and being a pregnant mom. You know, you don't really know what you're going to need, and not that you do when you're pregnant either, but you're trying to get all these things. You're trying to cover all these bases. You know, what are we going to need? What are we going to need? And you're not going to really know until they get there. So we're trying to, my husband and I, we dabble a little bit in minimalism. So we, you know, wanted to be really intentional about the things that we got. We didn't want to get, you know, everything under the sun. So when I first started to try to think about like a registry, I of course put every like popular thing on there, like what I'm going to need so much stuff. And then I actually ended up taking some things off because it's like, you know, we might need those things. We might, but I don't want to overdo it. So one of the things that we, actually have being delivered tomorrow that I'm so excited about is we have a glider coming, and pretty much every mom I've talked to says that the glider is an essential thing, like that is just like, was so great for, helping, feed the baby, put the baby down, like just, a comfortable spot that, you can be that's really relaxing. So
I think it's a really good thing to have a good glider that will grow with you for quite some time. I think that's really, because we have a glider and it's kind of on the older side and a little too small. So eventually I'd like to upgrade, but you have the opportunity to get it at the beginning. I would definitely recommend that.
Exactly. So the one that we're getting is, like I said, we're, being very intentional about this. So we're big readers, as I've mentioned before. So this is our glider is also more of an armchair. So it actually will be able to do the double duty of, being in our reading corner and being a special place where, dad can read to the baby and all of that. So yeah, we're really excited about that.
I wanted to briefly mention I wanted to get into a little bit of our Mombie Who Inspires. And so you had mentioned one particularly as to who you have been inspired by. Can you give us one of your Mombies who inspires you so far in the adoption world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually got two people. The first one is famous and the second one is not. I've shared this story on my blog, but an adopted Mombie who inspires me is the Today Show anchor, Hoda Kotb.
Kotb.
Dang it. I knew I was going to say it wrong. Okay. So she was actually in her 50s when she approached her partner about her desire to adopt. Her partner was really supportive, and he was instantly on board. And she adopted her darling daughter, Haley. Her adoption story inspired her to write the book I've Loved You Since Forever, which is a super popular book right now. I'm sure you probably can't have gone anywhere without hearing about this book. But and she shared her story on Ellen, and the pictures of her daughter are so darling. So it's a really special connection that she has with her daughter, and that her age or all of that, nothing mattered. She just knew that she wanted to be a mom, and she did it, and she's loving it, and she's having a really great time with her daughter. And that book is so sweet. We've actually had a couple people gift it to us because they were just, it was so special. So I obviously it's one of those books that's really meant a lot to a lot of people.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So my second adoptive mom who inspires is actually my own mom. Yeah, so my mom did a step-parent adoption when I was young, and adopting me was always really important to her because she wanted to show me that I was her child just the same as my brother and sister, and that she loved me that much, that she really wanted to be, the name on my birth certificate, and so that was, really important to her. And she and my dad are actually in Italy right now, and she sent me pictures of the cannolis that they're eating, so she doesn't know that I'm talking about her, but I will tell her. And
it's okay, we have the show recorded.
That's right, yeah. So she's having a great time. So hopefully she's getting some nice vibes in Italy right now that she's being talked about. So love you, Mom.
Aw. Well, getting to the end of our show, I'm going to let Kira ask me a couple of questions. Usually I get questions from the audience, but I know that Kira has some questions about the first few weeks and months with the baby. So I'll give that as much time as I can. So I'm going to let you ask me, what do you have for me?
Well, as a first-time mom who could become a mom at any second, I'm definitely most concerned about the first couple of weeks. So what was your baby's sleep schedule like at the beginning?
So that is a good question, and of course most new parents are probably cringing because there's not a lot of sleep at the beginning of a baby. So when you come home, generally when you are breastfeeding, I believe the doctor will tell you need to feed the baby every 2 hours. And the reason for that is because they have problems with latching. If they're so hungry, they just start pecking at you, and they're like, and they root around, but they're kind of so hungry that they can't focus. And so getting them into the proper positioning and latching can be difficult. So they say every 2 hours. With an adoption, you're more than likely going to be using formula. There are options out there for purchasing milk or getting milk donated to you, breast milk, which is definitely an option, and you can do that. Milk actually is metabolized a lot faster in babies than formula is. So as far as I know, and I mean, again, like I said, I'm not a doctor, but even with formula, you probably want to wake up with the baby every 2 hours because their stomachs are so teeny tiny that they're going to go through that really quickly. And then after 2 weeks of that, then you're going to go to sort of elongating that time and letting that maybe 3 hours. And then as they age, their circadian rhythms are going to sort of come around. They'll sleep more at night. They'll be awake more during the day. Obviously, there's going to be times when the baby, what they call cluster feeds. And so cluster feeding, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, they might be feeding every hour. So it's just a growing process. And honestly, when it comes to that and the breast, formula is really nice to have. So that's sort of what the sleep schedule is going to be like in the first couple of weeks. You're looking at 2 hours up.
Okay, no sleep. Got it.
Good times.
So, we're in the research I've done so far, I think that a bassinet is the best sleeping situation for us. But what were your sleeping arrangements? Did you co-sleep? Did you use a bassinet? What are your recommendations or thoughts?
So in my last show, I discussed the DockATot, which I'd said was one of my all-time favorite products. And again, there's some controversy around that. There's controversy pretty much around everything that is a baby. But when it comes to the way that we did things, we started out with a bassinet in the room. The American Pediatrics Association usually states that you should be sleeping in the same room as your baby for the first year. It can prevent SIDS. But then I read another study that said after 4 months, generally, if baby goes into a different room and sleep separate from you, you both sleep better. So again, controversial depending on how you want to do it. We did the bassinet until 4 months because we had the DockATot in the bassinet. And if you have had a baby and you've had a bassinet, they are not comfortable. Your baby came out of the womb. It came out of a teeny tiny womb or really comfortable, loud place. And now you're setting it on a super hard surface and he or she is going to probably not enjoy that. So my baby didn't like to be swaddled around her arms. She actually preferred to be swaddled, but sort of across her torso. There were times that we could swaddle her, but it took a lot of effort, and she eventually swaddling is not an easy thing, by the way, just to let you all know. If you do a traditional swaddle, trying to figure that out is really difficult. So there are some easy swaddles out there where you Velcro over, those are kind of nice to have. But she didn't like it, so she did end up wiggling out at some point. So that's part of the process as well. But anyway, she slept in the same room with us. She didn't sleep in the bed with us. There's a lot of, again, controversy with that. I was too scared. I did not want to worry about suffocation from myself, rolling onto, and you just don't sleep good. I mean, I had her in the bed with me a couple times, and I just did not sleep well at all, and it was just for a couple hours. So after that, I was just like, no, thank you. I'm going to stay with the bassinet. And then after 4 months, we transitioned from the bassinet into the crib that we have. So that is most of our show today. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we signed off today?
Nope, I think we're good.
Well, that concludes today's show of American Mombie. Big thanks to Kira for joining us today and sharing her stories. It's not always an easy thing to share the hard stuff, but I know that there are many women out there who share similar struggles, and I hope that they know that they aren't alone. So thank you for sharing that with us and those women out there as well. And thank you to my audience for hanging out with us today. I'm DJ Mombie, and you can catch me here every Monday at 1 p.m. on 102.3 FM or radio.dominican.edu, Penguin Radio, the official radio station of Dominican University of California. Or you can find me on Twitter at DJ Mombie.